like Greg said, it's very hard to tell if all of you can hear me and see me, but hi out there, good morning. So I am the director of the Shippensburg University Small Business Development Center. We cover Cumberland, Franklin, York, and Adams County. We are funded by the Small Business Administration, which I'm sure all of you have heard a lot about over the last couple of weeks. And we're also funded by the Department of Community Economic Development. And then we also get some funding from our host, and our host is currently Shippensburg University. Now, a lot of people get in the York area go, oh my goodness, you know, Shippensburg's way far away from York. Don't worry, we do have a consultant, Jen Horning, and she is full-time over in the York County area, so she's available to work with businesses. We also can travel and we can do remote calls, so we have the availability to meet with clients in York County. Currently, right now, we're not meeting anybody face-to-face, just like everybody else. Everything is virtual, like we're doing right now. And just like everybody else, we're just learning along the way. We do provide no-cost consulting, which is a really great resource for small businesses. You know, we're not specialists in government procurement. We're not specialists in intellectual property or technology. There's other programs, state-funded programs that provide that kind of assistance. We're more of a general business consulting. So in our typical work day, we're helping clients with maybe business plans and financial projections and trying to grow their business, or maybe how to get registered. But now things are different, and our primary focus these last couple of weeks have been helping businesses with the COVID funding, understanding that, and getting prepared for a recovery disaster. So I'm just going to give some updates about the SBA program and what's going on with that, because those are the #1 calls I'm fielding all day long. So I'm just going to give some information about that, some information about scams, and some other information for you guys. I think this stuff is probably the most relevant, because like I said, every day I'm getting questions. So I'm sure there's people out there that are going to have these same questions that I'm getting. So I'm just going to go over the 2 main SBA programs that everybody has been hearing about. The EIDL program, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, and the PPP program, the Payroll Protection Program. So with the EIDL loan, that is a typical small business administration disaster loan. So, you know, if there was a hurricane somewhere, the SBA goes down and they work with those local people and the businesses and doing direct lending. This is the only time the SBA does direct lending is in a disaster. So they released that program for this. What's kind of interesting though is we know that it's completely nationwide. So it is getting very overloaded, and it's been fluid and changing on how you can apply. Since they released it in March, the application process, I believe, has changed about 4 or 5 times, which is quite crazy. In that program, the EIDL program, you can use it for your working capital. So the things that you've, like the payroll, the rent, the utilities, the things that you've needed to spend money on. It's not there to help you expand and grow. It's there to help you pay for the things that, just the basic things that you've needed to pay for the last couple of weeks, and maybe for the next couple of weeks while your business is maybe shut down. It is at 3.75%. But it is out for 30 years, and that's a key point to note when you're looking at it in comparison to the PPP. So you have this EIDL program, 3.75% up to 30 years. And like I said, you can use it on rent, payroll, all that stuff. It's not forgiven, so that's one difference from the other program. Now there is also the up to 10K advance. And a lot of people are getting very confused by that because they think that they're going to be getting a full 10,000. What it is, it's based on your full-time employees that you had. So if you only have 1 employee, then you're only going to be getting $1,000 in the advance. So just as a heads up about that, because there's been a lot of confusion about that. I will go ahead and jump right now to a topic I was going to have for later, but a lot of people have been saying, hey, I applied for the EIDL program online, you know, weeks ago, and I haven't heard anything yet. They're just, first off, the there's everybody nationwide is applying for the program. So there's just a lot of people. So you just have to remember that if you got an application number, you're just going to have to be patient because you're in the system if you have an application number. There is really no way to check what's going on with your application. You can't go online and type in your application number. So instead, like I said, you're just gonna have to be patient if you have an application number. That's the #1 call I've been getting lately is how can I check on the status? You can call the SBA hotline that they have for it, but I've heard horror stories that some people are caller number 1600 in the line and various things like that. So it's hard to say to be patient, but just be patient at the moment. But I have heard that some people have started to get the advance, the up to $10,000 advance. So just as a heads up, that's starting to come out. The next program is the Payroll Protection Program. That is the one that would be done through your commercial lender. So PNC, York Traditions, various banks like that, People's Bank. We do know that the banks are preferring to work with their current banking customers. So not a whole lot of banks are taking people that are non-bank customers. So that's been one issue that has come across with a lot of commercial businesses. So just, you know, if you have a current bank that you're working with, PNC, you know, People's, contact them. They'll have their own application. That is who you apply through. You do not apply on the SBA.gov website. So just a little bit of information about the PPP program. So that is to keep employees on. That was the whole point of the program. So if they didn't go off to unemployment, you could keep them on payroll. So they're going to be looking at your previous 12 months and how much you spent on payroll, and then it's going to be based on that to determine how much money then you can get to cover the payroll for the next, you know, couple of next 2 months. It also has a little bit of money in there that you can also use on rent and utilities. But this is where the PPP program differs. You can get the PPP program forgiven if you spend it on payroll, but if you spend more than 25% of it on rent, utilities, and other things, that won't be forgiven. And then here's the catch. If you do spend it on those other items above and beyond that, then you will have to pay back that within 2 years. So that is where I'm trying to explain to clients, you need to break out what makes the most sense for you. If you know you're going to be spending it more on running utilities because you don't have that much payroll, the EIDL program will probably make a lot more sense for you because you'll have 30 years to spend it instead of 2. I mean, just think about, you know, if you get a loan for $50,000 on the PPP program and you spend it all on rent and utilities, and then the next thing you know, or whatever inventory, and the next thing you know, you have to pay it back in 2 years. That might be a lot tougher than paying it back over 30. And the other thing to think about too, to determine which one, if you know, let's say you're a sole proprietorship. I've had this one here just a lot recently. So you're a sole proprietorship, and last year your business made no money and you didn't take a draw at all in the business. You basically just broke even and you didn't take a draw. Then the EIDL program will probably make a lot more sense for you than the PPP program. So just some basic scenarios with that. One other thing I want to mention about those 2 programs is that there is a lot of scams related to those programs. And there's also a lot of false information out there. For instance, yesterday there was a rumor going around this weekend that there was a 15,000K limit on the EIDL program. Somewhere that got picked up by the New York Times, and then somewhere the US Chamber of Commerce picked it up, and the next thing you know, it was spreading like wildfire. That is not true. There is no 15,000 limit. That was just a rumor. There is a lot of scams also. Last week I took a call from a downtown Inc. group in my territory, which it was not downtown York Inc., so do not worry about this, but it was another one in my 4 counties. And they had gotten a phone call from somebody that said they worked for the SBA in Georgia, and they needed to know, they wanted to know if any of her businesses in her downtown association needed any help with completing the EIDL loan program or the PPP. That was a scam. The SBA is not going to be calling people and asking them questions like that. And certainly the SBA wouldn't have somebody from Georgia calling up to somebody in Pennsylvania to ask. So you just have to be aware. There's emails going around with scams. So just, you got to be cautious in this time. If you're going to apply for the EIDL loan program, you go to sba.gov. If you're going to be applying for the PPP program, go to your local bank. And just like I said, be aware and cautious of other solicitations. I will also say this too, if you get the money, I would probably just keep that a little bit quiet at the moment, because there's a lot of other businesses that are waiting for their funds. So let's say you are a downtown retailer and you by chance just happen to get your PPP loan or your 10,000K, up to 10,000K advance. I wouldn't go running over to the next door retailer's location and being like, oh, I already got my money, because they're not getting their money right now. Maybe they're a week behind, or maybe their bank is just a little bit behind. So I would just, I'm not saying don't be happy that you got, I'm just saying that I've seen some people get cranky that they found out their friend got it and they haven't gotten it yet. So just to keep friendships going, everybody at some point is going to get these funds. Like I said, you just have to be patient. The PA SBDC network is holding daily webinars with the SBA. You can view them on YouTube. I will put that link in chat after I'm done here on how to find the daily webinars. They're held every day at 9 a.m. The PA SBDC network, there's 18 or 16 of us in Pennsylvania, so we have a lead office. So they're the ones running it, and they got the SBA to come in and do these programs too. It's a really great webinar to be on, because like I said, every day new information is coming out, things are changing. So it's great to go onto there and view and see the changes. They also record it so you can see yesterday's webinar. The thing is, you don't want to go back a week or see 3 days ago, because it's not relevant anymore. So try to keep up with the daily ones. But like I said, I will send a link for that. They are an hour and a half long. But they are full of information and they cover all the programs. And like I said, if you get the funds, or if you're wondering about where the funds are at, I can't check on them for you. So I get a lot of calls like that. Can you please, I have my application number. Can you please check it out? We do not have that availability, and the local SBA rep, Solomon, doesn't have that ability. The best bet is if you have an application number, like I said, you are in the queue, and they are starting to release the advance funds. So hopefully you will be getting that here at some point. We know that the stimulus checks have started to go out, so it's starting to catch up. And with the PPP program, there's been a lot of questions about that. The one thing I'm stressing to people is just remember, this is a brand new program. There's never been anything like the PPP program. They just released it, 2 weeks ago, a week ago. The banks didn't even have the information on the whole entire program until like 6 hours before the bank opened up. So it's a new program, so just be patient with your bankers. They're still trying to figure out the program. And that's all I really have at the moment. I'm sure I'm gonna have a lot of questions, so I'll just wait till the end. But for right now, I'll pass it over to Anne.
Thanks so much, Robin. Really appreciate your update. And much like the banking laws, the employment laws have been changing on a daily basis. They actually are changing faster than the weather, it seems like these days. So I put together a PowerPoint. I have a lot of information which we may not get through, but after the end, I will be emailing Par so that she can share the slides with all of the participants. And I'm happy to take questions when we're done. So with that, we'll get started with the PowerPoint. All right. If nothing else, during COVID-19, we've learned that there are plenty of acronyms. So the Family First Coronavirus Response Act that was signed into law in the middle of March, which feels like a lifetime ago. And this law created two very important acts. First is the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act, And next, it provided a new reason for emergency family and medical leave. These laws went into effect on April 1st, 2020, and they sunset on December 31st. It applies to everyone in the private sector with less than 500 employees, and you count the number of employees on the day that someone comes to you and asks for paid sick leave. So you might have been covered initially, and then with layoffs, you might not have been covered initially, but through layoffs, you might be covered anywhere between April 1 and December 31. It also applies to public employers regardless of the number of employees. As I said, it's not applicable before April 1st. We were not sure of that initially. Then the Department of Labor issued regulations clarifying that if you laid someone off or someone was sick before April 1, the paid sick leave does not apply to them. In addition, if someone was laid off, they're not entitled to paid sick leave if they were laid off before April 1st, or if they're laid off after April 1st and subsequently become ill. If they've been laid off, they've been separated from work due to a lack of work, they're not eligible for paid sick leave. Everyone on payroll is eligible for paid sick leave. And there are 6 COVID-19 related reasons. And the 6th one, no one really knows what that is. We don't have to worry about that right now. But the other 5 are pretty clear and they're pretty important. During that emergency paid sick leave, which is up to 2 weeks, the employer has to continue the health insurance benefits. And again, it provides paid sick leave over a 2-week period, up to 2 weeks max. If you're talking about a full-time employee, it's based on their schedule, whether they're hourly non-exempt or a salaried individual. They get 2 weeks of their pay up to 80 hours. Part-time employees, their hours are based on a normal schedule. And those 6 reasons for emergency paid sick leave, they're subject to a federal, state, or local quarantine or isolation order related to COVID-19. This is not generally the governor's stay-at-home order. It has to be something specifically related to that individual. So if you can't work because your employer closed due to the closure order, that does not qualify. The second reason, if the employee has been advised by their healthcare provider to self-quarantine due to concerns related to COVID-19, perhaps they were in a hot spot, they've been asked to stay home for 14 days, they're eligible for emergency paid sick leave. Third, if they are experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and seeking a medical diagnosis, and they just need to be seeking a diagnosis and have some COVID-19 symptoms, which I believe have expanded just from initially a cough, fever, to include some gastrointestinal loss of taste or smell as well. The fourth reason, they are caring for an individual who is subject to a quarantine or isolation order, or that person has been advised to self-quarantine due to concerns related to COVID-19. Or fifth, they're caring for his or her child whose school or place of daycare is closed, or their childcare is unavailable due to COVID-19. So this also includes, family members who would provide babysitting or childcare services so that employee could work. And if that babysitter is not available because he or she is self-quarantining due to COVID-19, the employee is eligible for paid sick leave. And finally, there's a catch-all. If there's a condition specified by the Department of Health and Human Services, that has not been utilized yet, so we don't really need to worry about the 6th reason at this time. There's 2 different levels of pay. There's 100% pay for the first 3 reasons for the individual's own medical diagnosis or quarantine related to COVID-19. That is capped at $511 a day, $5,110 total. And again, the employer can get tax credits for that, but we need to make sure that the employer has proper documentation. So you're going to want to make sure that you have a request form for the individual to certify that they've been advised to quarantine, provide the name of the healthcare provider, or that they have COVID-19 symptoms and they're seeking a diagnosis, and provide the name of the healthcare provider. If an individual is caring for someone else who's subject to a quarantine or isolation order, or they're caring for his or her child, they are paid at 2/3 their regular rate of pay, capped at $200 a day for $2,000 total. And again, those individuals will need to complete a form so that the employer has sufficient documentation so that they can seek those tax credit reimbursements. The second part of the FFCRA that applies to employers is the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act. And this provides a new reason for FMLA leave. It is leave to care for a son or daughter whose school or place of care is closed or their child care provider is unavailable due to COVID-19 related reasons. And similar to the FMLA, it provides up to 12 weeks of job protected leave. The employer must continue health insurance during this time. It is not like the FMLA in that employers with less than 500 employees are subject to the emergency FMLEA leave. Normally, you have to have 50 or more employees to be subject to the Family Medical Leave Act. But again, this is a crisis, and so there's federal legislation that provides leave for individuals to care for their children. It applies to all employees who've been employed for at least 30 calendar days, full-time and part-time. There is an exception for some of you out there with less than 50 employees. You may not have to provide the 12 weeks of Emergency Family and Medical Leave Act. You still have to provide paid sick leave if the employee is eligible. But small employers, if you can demonstrate that this paid leave under the Emergency Family and Medical Leave Expansion Act would exceed the resources you have available, cause you to cease minimal operations, or their absence would jeopardize your financial health or operations, or you don't have enough people to perform those duties or provide those services of the employee who seeks to go on leave, and those duties are necessary to maintain minimal operations, you may determine that you are exempt. And that has to be an analysis that the employer does. There's no application for it. But keep in mind that if you don't provide the paid sick leave or the expansion of FMLA leave, you may be subject to claims under the Fair Labor Standards Act for failure to pay minimum wage. That's how violations will be treated. And again, the up to 12 weeks of leave, the first 2 weeks are unpaid because the employee can use the paid sick leave under the Emergency Paid Sick Leave Act. And that time runs concurrently with the 12 weeks under the expanded FMLA leave. The remaining 10 weeks of the expanded FMLA leave, the emergency FMLA leave, are paid at 2/3 the regular rate of pay, capped at $200 a day. And again, this is a new reason for leave under the FMLA. It does not provide more weeks, and that means that employees who have already used 12 weeks of leave are not entitled to use the emergency FMLA leave expansion. Employees on this emergency FMLA leave expansion may use PTO to supplement their leave. So the employers can allow them to run PTO, paid time off, concurrent with that emergency leave to supplement it. But employers will not receive tax credits, obviously, for the PTO. They will receive credits for the Emergency Family Medical Leave Expansion Act leave. But again, documentation is really important. And so you should make sure that you have a form for those individuals to complete. Next up is the CARES Act. It created the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. That expands eligibility for those not traditionally eligible for unemployment, such as independent contractors and those who are self-employed. It's a supplement to the Pennsylvania's unemployment benefits. It is a program that has to be applied separately from the traditional unemployment benefits, and I believe that labor industry is currently working on that portal. It is not active yet, so independent contractors cannot yet apply for those benefits, but we're hoping that the site is up in 2 weeks. You certainly should visit the LNI's COVID-19 page for additional information. In addition, the CARES Act, the PAU will provide for up to $600 per week in addition to PAUC benefits, so that's a supplement to the normal unemployment benefits. It is retroactive to April 4th. And it applies to all individuals who are otherwise entitled to receive regular UC benefits through July 31. In addition, it extends the UC benefits for up to 13 weeks if the individual is still unemployed after 26 weeks. What are some things that we should be concerned about during this time? The Fair Labor Standards Act, as I mentioned before, failure to pay that emergency sick leave or the Emergency Family Medical Leave Expansion Act is treated as a failure to pay minimum wage under the Fair Labor Standards Act, and that's the federal law that governs payment of wages and classification of employees as exempt or non-exempt. And Pennsylvania's own minimum wage and hour laws apply. as well. So if someone is entitled to paid sick leave and they don't receive it, they can bring a claim under the Fair Labor Standards Act as well as under Pennsylvania law. The Wage Payment and Collection Law provides opportunities for individuals to say, hey, I wasn't paid those wages and I'm entitled to them. And they can collect attorney's fees and double damages under the Fair Labor Standards Act, triple damages, depending on whether or not it was a willful violation. So we need employers to be very mindful and very careful when they're determining eligibility. In addition, employers still need to make sure they're paying for all hours of work, and that can be a challenge when individuals are working remotely. You want to make sure that individuals are completing timesheets and submitting them so that you can ensure that you're paying for hours of work. We do know that under the FFCRA, the guidance issued by the Department of Labor indicates that they're not going to consider paying hourly, paying in chunks of hours, or using intermittent leave under the expanded FMLA Leave Act as anything that would hurt the classification of an exempt employee to be non-exempt. So in other words, if someone is normally a salaried individual and they're using intermittent leave under the Emergency FMLA Act, they can still work intermittently. You can track their hours and you won't jeopardize their salaried status because of the need to do intermittent leave if they're caring for a child. In addition, employers and employees have to agree to that. Intermittent leave is not a leave as of right under the Emergency FFMLEA Act. Make sure that you're maintaining accurate hours accurate records of hours worked during the pandemic. Working remotely can be a challenge. There was also some confusion out there as far as could you reduce salaried employees' salary, or would you run afoul of the FLSA? Because normally salaried individuals aren't subject to a reduction in pay based on a reduction in the quality of work. There is clear guidance from the Department of Labor that says in response to an economic downturn, an employer may reduce the salary of salaried individuals so long as it's not tied to a quantity of hours worked and it is not used to try to evade overtime laws. So if you do need to reduce salaries for your salaried employees, it should be done in a way that says, as a result of cost-cutting measures and the financial strains caused by the COVID-19 crisis, we're implementing an X% reduction of salary. We hope this is temporary, but this will be in place until further notice and until we're able to determine when it's appropriate to restore salaries to their prior positions. Also want to be careful with your documentation and the notice because we don't want it to be tied to a 20% reduction in hours. You can certainly note that individuals who are salaried need to work the hours from their duties and that you might see a reduction in work caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Keep in mind too that the ADA still applies to individuals with 15 or more employees, individuals with 4 or more employees, or strike that, employers with 15 or more. Employers with 4 or more employees have to comply with the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act, which has similar provisions. And what does this mean? Right now, your main focus would be on an individual who has not been told to self-quarantine, is not seeking a medical diagnosis, but is afraid to come to work because maybe they have COPD or asthma. And if they say, look, I'm just too scared to come to work, I'm worried about my underlying health condition and COVID-19, they should be accommodated with leave under the ADA. And or if you are an employer with 50 or more employees, you can provide them with FMLA. And so the ADA requires a reasonable accommodation unless it would present an undue hardship. So keep that in mind for those individuals with underlying health conditions. The ADA and the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act requires employers to engage in that interactive process. Don't forget about the family and medical leave. Employees with their own COVID-19 conditions, after they get the emergency paid sick leave, they might be eligible for FMLA leave, and that requires employers who are subject to the FMLA, this is 50 or more employees, to provide notice of rights and responsibilities and grant the individual up to 12 weeks off for his or her own serious health condition. And we believe that that runs concurrently with the 2 weeks of emergency paid sick leave that is required under the FFCRA. Okay, Don't forget to, if FMLA leave expires and that individual is still out, their request for additional leave or other accommodations should be analyzed under the Americans with Disabilities Act or the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. OSHA, there's a lot of guidance out there. Previously, COVID-19 was a reportable event that required the employers to determine whether or not it was work-related. Recently, on April 13th, OSHA got issued new enforcement discretion and guidance. So for most industries, not the healthcare industries or first responders, there is significant discretion now whether to record and report COVID-19. And again, if you are in the healthcare, emergency response, or correctional institution, you do not have that discretion. And those individuals, the other industries can decide not to report unless there's objective evidence reasonably available to the employer that the COVID-19 case may be work-related. In addition, planning ahead, keep in mind that you need to be mindful of how you return employees to work. We don't want there to be concerns about returning someone who is older or someone who might have a disability. We want to avoid discrimination claims in your return to work process when things do return to normal. You want to consider your OSHA workforce recommendations, CDC and DOH guidance. Think about how you're going to have individuals return to the workplace and whether or not COVID-19 screening in some shape or form is appropriate for your business. Plan ahead, think about core skills and cross-training and who is best to return and in what order. Finally, keep in mind that the National Labor Relations Act still applies, and you should be very careful about individuals talking about terms and conditions in the workplace, especially employees complaining about issues with or lack of personal protective equipment. They probably are engaged in protected activity under the NLRA. Do not discipline or terminate employees who are engaged in those protected activities, or employers who are not even unionized will be subject to unfair labor practices. So I know I hit you with a lot of information this morning. I did want to do a run through. I'm going to turn it over to Elaine now for questions. Everybody stay safe. I'll be happy to answer questions. And if there's additional information that you need, feel free to email me after the webinar is over. So with that, I'll turn it over to Elaine.
Thanks, Anne, and thank you to all of our speakers for sharing really great information. And as you've all said, you know, things are changing daily. New policies are being introduced, and it's really very valuable for us to have the benefit of speaking with you, who's on the front line of this, truly, in your industries, and helping us to really, you know, decipher all of this and distill it into ways that we can use. And so we do have some questions based on the information that you shared. And Anne, if you don't mind, I'll start with you. There was a question about salary reductions you mentioned. Do salary reductions need to be organization-wide, or can they be job-specific?
That's a great question. They can be job specific. Keep in mind though that if you are implementing salary reductions for a certain job classification, you don't want to have, let's say the job classification has more people over 40 than another classification. Keep in mind that you can't have a disparate impact on individuals who might be over 40 or in a protected class. So make those decisions about what job classifications you're going to reduce their salary based on job-related reasons. Perhaps you're going to pick the highest 3 paid classifications, or the job classifications whose work has decreased the most. And if an employer bases their decision on that, you're going to have a great job-related defense to individuals saying, well, I was discriminated against when you reduced my salary. You always want to look too at the comparators. Did you treat someone else in a similar position who did not have a disability or who is under 40 the same as the individual who was over 40 or who might have a disability?
Great, thank you for that. That does make sense. And also related to privacy, there's a question: if an employee is suspected of having COVID-19, or I think you mentioned they are still waiting to be tested, what is the balance between HIPAA privacy issues and keeping other employees and the public informed and safe?
That's a great,
delicate balance.
right. That's a great question. And employers are not covered by HIPAA in the sense that their employees' medical conditions can't be disclosed because of HIPAA, but they are covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act. So the employer needs to maintain the confidentiality of that individual's medical information under the ADA, unless you're obviously a healthcare provider and you have medical information about that employee, in which case HIPAA would apply. But generally, employers are not covered by HIPAA just because they have employees who might have a potential COVID-19 diagnosis. So we're looking at the ADA and also privacy protections. That individual's name should not be disclosed to the workforce, but what we typically recommend is that the employees who had direct contact with that employee who is now out on a suspected COVID-19 diagnosis, that those individuals be notified without, again, identifying the individual who is under quarantine, to let them know that you may have been exposed to an individual who is seeking a COVID-19 diagnosis, and then the employer needs to decide if it's appropriate for those individuals to self-quarantine for 14 days. And again, the CDC changed its guidance. Initially, it was everybody would self-quarantine for 14 days. Now I think they're saying if you've had exposure within 48 hours, those are the individuals who should be quarantined. And for those situations, we know that the emergency paid sick leave would kick in. And so those individuals that we're telling to stay home for 14 days could get the emergency paid sick leave act, and the employer will get those tax credits back up to the maximum for that leave. But it's important to notify those individuals, and the employer needs to take appropriate action while protecting the identity of that employee and still maintaining a safe workplace and ensuring that prevention and spread is contained.
Thank you, Anne. Robin, I have a couple questions for you that came in early on in your presentation. You were talking about idle loans, and you spoke about sole proprietors. There was a question about the best grants or loans for sole proprietors with no employees.
So either one, the idle loan or the PPP program could work. The PPP program would be based on the draw that they take. Like I said, if they had no draw last year, then it's really not going to be a great program for them. The idle loan could work. Now there is a little catch here. If they're a sole proprietor and they were showing all last year really just a decrease, there was really no growth of the company, no sales, nothing like that, then that's really not going to be, either one's not going to work, because the whole entire point is of the disaster loans is to be given to companies that were impacted by the disaster, not priorly impacted, and then they're trying to use this to either get some cash inflow or to grow. So either program would work. I do not know of any grants. The closest with the grants is with that 10K, up to 10K advance. If they're sole proprietor, then it would be 1,000. That's the closest that there is to grants right now.
Okay, so you said 1,000.
Yeah, that's my understanding. That's my understanding. So I have not seen, only seen one of the advances so far. So, but they do ask on the question how many employees there are. So that's what they're basing it on.
So that was a question that came in also. How did they obtain the number of employees? I don't remember that question being asked on the quick form.
Right. So I'm assuming they're talking about the idle loan. So
yes.
It actually was on page 7 of the application. It was at the very end. And then on the next page, you went into business owners information. And then so it was on page 7.
Okay, we'll share that. Let's see, other questions that came in. So we talked, I think, a little bit in the beginning about the Working Capital Access Fund. It was open quickly, closed in less than a week, right, Robin, as I recall?
Yeah, the state one, yeah, it was very quick.
It was very quick. Are there any indications that that program or a similar program would open again at the state level?
That would be great if it did. I'm assuming that it's going to have to be based on the money that comes in from the feds, and then hopefully, or the governor would have to do a budget adjustment. So I have not heard anything, but it was so competitive. I mean, I think here in Cumberland County, there was, I can't remember the number, like over 100 or something that applied, but so far, like only 3 have gotten it or something. I mean, that's very competitive because when you think about it, there was only so much money for the whole entire state.
Yeah.
So it was very, you know, there was a lot of my clients that applied and did not get it. And it's just sad because they spent so much time on the application. So I do hope that they open it back up. But I also know too that, you know, some municipalities are looking at opening up some funds with their block grants. So, I mean, I think things will be starting to come out that, you know, people are on the works on. I just saw that Giant is offering a grant program for agriculture, you know, for farmers.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's
Okay.
they're starting to come out, but it's unfortunately, you know, these small businesses need it now to maintain their payroll and to pay for things, and it's not, the money's not right now, and that's the sad part.
Right. Another question just came in, Robin. The 15K idle cap myth. Is there a FAQ somewhere that states this is false or something that people can share with their colleagues and peers?
I got an email yesterday from Michael Kane that he's with the SBA, and he said that that was a myth. So that was coming directly from the SBA and from the regional office in Philadelphia. So I have not looked to see if they have released a press release on that. I just know that he sent me an email saying that. So.
And we can certainly follow up. And as you mentioned, that you have links to share about webinars, and certainly share out anything if there is a press release. We can share it through our e-newsletter and through the website. Let's see, I think we have fielded most of the questions that have come in. Oh, one other one. Assuming I get approved for more than one loan, are there restrictions on being able to apply for multiple programs or receive funds for multiple programs?
You are allowed to receive both the EIDL and the PPP. You just have to make sure you're not spending the funds on the exact same thing. So you can't double dip, basically, is what we're saying. So,
okay. But
you can accept both. Or if you got the state funds and you want to take the EIDL loan too, you can do both. But it's allowable. You just have to really make sure you document and you're not double dipping on anything and spending funds on the same thing.
For the same category.
Yes.
Great. Well, I'm looking at our Q&A, and I think we've fielded all of the questions that we've received. And I just want to share with anyone who is participating, if you take this information back to your organization or you think of questions afterwards, certainly the information that was shared at the beginning of the screen, there were emails for all of our presenters. Reach out to them. They can connect you with resources. There's also a wealth of information on the preparedyork.com website. We receive a lot of the information there from our partners, from SBDC, SBA SCORE, the York, I'm sorry. Yes, and there's also a Prepared York, Prepared York and Prepared Central PA, I apologize, .com with more resources. So everything from small business, employers, employees, healthcare, lots of categories with information there. Also on preparedyork.com, on the first page, there is a COVID survey. So if there are, whatever is top of mind for you, resources you need, what are your top concerns? If you would fill out that survey, it would really help us to continue to, as I said, distill this information and bring the best resources to you possible. Anything else that Ann, you and Robin would like to share before I talk about our next business series workshop date?
I just want to, go ahead, Ann.
I was just saying thanks everyone for participating. I know this is these are unprecedented times and there's a lot of uncertainty. So if we can help in any way, please don't hesitate to reach out.
Yes.
Yes. And I just wanted to let everybody know, I just posted the link for the PASBDC network on YouTube where they are doing the daily webinars. So you can view the live one or see the past ones.
Great. Thank you so much. And also, we recorded this workshop, and we'll make it available on the Downtown York, PA website as well.
Great.
If someone would like to share the link or revisit the resources again. And our next business series workshop presented by PNC is on May 20th. So certainly go back to the website, look for more details on the topic. Maybe we'll gather here again by Zoom. Either way, we look forward to continuing to have these conversations, share good information with all of you. We thank you all for joining us this morning, and we hope you have a great rest of the day and rest of your week. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Bye.